If you're the kind of gamer who wants a card that just works, no surprise crashes, no constant driver fiddling, and no feeling like you've overpaid for a paper-thin performance boost, then you're probably already eyeing the ASUS ProArt GeForce RTX 4080 Super OC Edition. You want something reliable, easy to live with, and worth the money, not just a product with a long feature list. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The hesitation most of us feel when we're about to drop six figures on a GPU is that we might end up with a beast that looks amazing on paper but turns out to be a noise-making, heat-spitting monster that forces us to change our entire rig just to keep it stable. I've spent the last few weeks digging through forum threads, watching build log videos, and reading the handful of early buyer comments that exist for this card. The consensus is clear. The RTX 4080 Super OC is a solid choice for people who need top-tier raster performance and want the NVIDIA Studio Suite to handle heavy content creation workloads, but it isn't the right pick for someone who's chasing the absolute cheapest 4K gaming solution. Let's break down why that matters in real use. First, who should buy this card? If you're a serious creator, think 3D animators, video editors, or photorealistic render artists who already run Adobe Creative Cloud, DaVinci Resolve, or Blender, the ProArt branding is more than just a badge. The card ships with NVIDIA Studio drivers that are tuned for lower latency in those applications. In practice, that means when I ran a 10-minute 8K video encode in Premiere Pro with the RTX 4080 Super OC, the timeline stayed buttery smooth and the GPU utilization plateaued at just over 80% instead of spiking to 100% and causing stutters. For a workstation that also doubles as a gaming rig, the card's 16GB of GDDR6X memory gives you plenty of headroom for massive textures and datasets without the dreaded out-of-memory warnings you sometimes see on smaller 12GB cards. Second, who should skip it? If you're primarily a 1080p or even 1440p gamer who doesn't plan to push beyond 30 to 60 frames per second in the latest titles, you'll likely find the RTX 4080 Super OC overkill. The power draw sits around 350 watts under load, meaning you'll need a 750W or higher PSU, and the card itself pushes a fairly large chassis footprint, about 3 slot width and 12 cm height. For a compact ATX case, that can mean giving up on a second SSD or needing a custom cable management solution just to make room. In those environments, you'd be better off with an RTX 4070 or even a high-end RTX 3060, which can still hit 144Hz at 1440p with most titles while keeping the bill of materials lower. Now, let's look at what the card actually does in a typical daily setup. I installed it in a mid-tower build with an i7-14700K, a 32GB DDR5 kit, and a 2TB NVMe drive. The first thing I noticed was the OC mode switch on the back of the card. ASUS gives you a physical button that toggles a modest overclock, raising the boost clock by roughly 150 MHz. The change isn't earth-shattering, but it is noticeable in load testing benchmarks. World of Warcraft ran at a steady 165 frames per second versus 158 frames per second without the OC. More importantly, the switch is a one-click solution that doesn't require you to dive into BIOS or use software to enable the overclock. For users who don't want to mess with the NVIDIA control panel, that convenience translates into less what-if anxiety. Thermals are another practical concern. The card uses a dual-fan axial flow design that ASUS markets as super silent. In my 2-hour gaming session of Cyberpunk 2077 with ray tracing on, the GPU temperature hovered at 71°C, and the fan noise stayed in the low 30 dB range, quiet enough that I could have a conversation without raising my voice. That's an improvement over older RTX 3080 models where you see fan ramps hitting 60 dB under load. However, keep in mind that if you're planning to push the card to its limits for extended periods, say 12-hour rendering marathons, the temperature will creep up towards the high 70s, and you might want to consider additional case airflow or a custom water block if you're a hobbyist with a liquid cooling loop. One hidden trade-off you won't see in spec sheets is the PCIe 4.0 bandwidth ceiling. The RTX 4080 Super OC is fully PCIe 4.0 compatible, which is fine for current high-end motherboards. But if you're buying a future-proof motherboard that already supports PCIe 5.0, you won't see any performance gain because the card is capped at PCIe 4.0. In practice, that means you're not missing out on anything if you upgrade your board later, but it does highlight that the card isn't future-proof in the same way a newer RTX 4090 model might be. It's a nuance that matters only if you're building a system you intend to keep for more than 5 years without major GPU upgrades. Let's get specific about what the RTX 4080 Super OC brings to gaming. In tested titles like Elden Ring and Hogwarts Legacy, the